this has been a long time in between drinks, I guess you could say. Nishant Joshi, thank you for coming in, for popping in, saying hi. You are one of the busier men in the country, and you have quite a storied past in a good way and in a very, very strange way. Don't pull those faces, mate. But hey, how you doing?
Stories past. Jeez, yeah, that's quite. Yeah, I suppose it's. Yeah, I suppose that's quite true. Yeah, it's good to be here with you, Obi.
Hey man, that's cool to see you. Good here as always, man. That was the secret going back a wee while. Now, I first came to get to know you through Twitter, through that crazy medium that you eventually got kicked off, which is the most absurd sort of scenarios around. Mate, that was a long time ago. How long has it been since you were on Twitter as AltCricket, alternative cricket?
I think it was 3 years ago.
Yeah.
I think it was 3 years ago, yeah.
Yeah. And basically you got kicked off just because you were telling too much truths about cricket around the world, I guess. People were taking offense to your truths.
Yeah, I mean, we were just gently ribbing. I mean, everybody really. I think that was the beauty of what I was doing. Looking back on it, is that I didn't really support anybody in particular, and I wasn't. I mean, I know cricket and all sport is very tribalistic as well, and I just really resented that. So I just enjoyed the chaos of being really honest with everybody, and just seeing the ripple effects and of how the cricket community reacted to that. Whether it was players such as yourself, or fans, or coaches, or commentators, TV producers, everybody reacted in their own way, and that was what I really delighted in observing. How some people would cover things up, some people would investigate more, and how some people would just remain blissfully ignorant.
You had built up without calling you a commentator or a pundit, but you had built up a pretty large following. You'd built up a pretty large reputation in terms of having an opinion, an alternative opinion, and maybe being, sometimes through ribbing, quite brutally honest about structures and maybe the wrong word, but maybe the right word, regimes. The end of days came because why?
Well, we still don't really know why. It's a little bit odd, and I suppose it kind of links back quite nicely to what's happening at the present day, and it's informing everything that I'm doing right now, to be fair, because it was one of my funnier jokes, I would have to say, and it was just about how Virat Kohli was being treated as a god while he was 12th man during the India versus Australia series, and it was quite a funny joke. It was like relatively inoffensive, to be honest, compared to a lot of the other things that I'd posted. It was really just, I mean, I'm sure you would agree, it was more gentle ribbing than anything else. It certainly wasn't vicious.
I think it's a pretty reasonable association in terms of how he is treated and adored, certainly in India.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's just one of those odd times where I think I posted it during a test match between India and Australia at Dharamshala, and I suppose that the irony was that it was my great dream to be at that test match, because I always wanted to see a cricket match at Dharamshala, and then I just couldn't get the time off work. So I was waking up early, 5 a.m. every day to watch these test matches, and I think it just was one of those things which it kind of tapped into a point where, for some reason, a lot of people were kind of febrile with this Kohli-related madness, and
it was self-fulfilling, wasn't it?
Yeah, a lot of people just took offense at the right time, and a lot of people reported me to Twitter, and my account disappeared.
That was kind of strange, because you built up, you were doing podcasts, you were doing video, you were doing, there was quite a lot around, without calling you a media channel, but you were creating quite a bit of content, quite a bit of media. And there was serious time and effort had gone into that could have gone anywhere. Certainly with cricket where it is at the moment, there's plenty of jobs for freelancers. Well, not maybe right now, but there was plenty of jobs, plenty of work, and a bit more money floating around before before the virus sort of has struck us. And then it all basically disappears, doesn't it? That platform of Twitter gave you a voice and gave you a platform.
Yeah, I mean, I think I retired on a really nice spot though. I think it was 99.4, or no, not 99.4, but something around that. It was in the 99,000 that I had followers, so nearly 100,000 followers on Twitter, who were really loyal followers as well. And 3 years ago, I mean, anybody can get 1 million followers if they want, but I mean, a few years ago, when it really seemed meritocratic and there wasn't so much influence from algorithms and that sort of thing, that was the kind of joy about building up a following at that time, that a lot of people had grown up with me during my 20s and were of the same age, or gone in from the late teens to the early 20s, and kind of had the same sort of realizations about life in general as well. And it was a really fun thing to have, and it was really fun experiences to have people starting from podcast number 1 to podcast 140, I think I reached. So yeah, it was great to be able to build a community like that. So it was a really weird feeling to just wake up one day, log on to Twitter and see that I didn't have death threats at me anymore.
Yeah, well, this is true. A lot has changed since then. While you were, so let's go back to that time when you were active with alternative cricket. One of the other things you were doing was studying your MD, studying to be a doctor. Mate, that's a pretty serious undertaking, as well as trying to create cricket content and media.
Yeah, I mean, one of the joyful things about being a medical student in Czech Republic, which is where I studied,
that's right,
for 6 years, we were really, really bored. I was really bored for a very long period of time, and everybody's constantly suffering from this low-lying level of depression anyway, because it's so dark and it's so. I mean, during winter, it's a foot of snow that you're going to have to. Nobody really fancies going to the pub or going for a drink or anything like that. There's nothing to do where I was in Czech Republic 10 years ago now. That was over 10 years ago, I think, when I started up. So there was just precious little to do. And so I had to find ways to occupy my own time and build up my own sort of, just find ways that I wouldn't get into trouble almost. And watching cricket was the only escape for me. And then obviously I realized that a lot of cricket writers were pretty crap. And then I realized that I could spin a yarn about cricket as well. So I decided that would be a really good way to spend my time. And then obviously AltCricket started taking flight, and we ended up doing a lot of good, I'm pleased to say, for a lot of people.
You were involved in a bit of cricket in the former Czech Republic, weren't you too? There was a small sort of undercurrent of cricket happening there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of my favorite articles that I ever had the privilege of writing was this long form piece on Cricket Info. I think it's the Cricket Monthly. So if anybody wants to Google Cricket in Prague on Cricket Info, that'll probably turn up. And there's a group of people who started, who set up Cricket in Prague about 20 years ago, and now they have regular tournaments. They have local cricket coaches. They have one full-time cricket coach called Chris Pearce. He's a great guy who's an expat from UK, and he just goes around schools in Czech Republic, and he does a lot of cricket videos in the Czech language, and he does a lot of coaching for kids, goes around to schools every day. It's fantastic as well. So there's a really, really good community in Czech cricket as well. It would be remiss of me to say as well that one of my good friends, who actually was the founders and fathers of Czech cricket, he unfortunately passed away this week, Scott Page. So a lot of what's going to be done over the next few years, I'm sure, is going to be done in his legacy.
Wow. Okay, that's sad. granted, but cool to have a part to play in that. So well done and congrats. And on the back of what you did with AltCricket, etc., and then one day it's here, the next morning it's kind of disappeared. That platform's disappeared. What do you do? What does that do to you, given that you've put a lot of time and a lot of effort into this content? What happens to Nish in that scenario? What do you do?
Well, in a way, it was a bit like an alter ego. So in a way, it was almost as if a part of me had just evaporated. It's a bit of like part of your soul has gone away, but not in a particularly negative way. I thought that it would really, really cause me a great deal of upset. But if anything, it was rather liberating. And I think it was just rather nice and rather pleasant to wake up, check your phone, and not actually have so many death threats. So I mean, not to say that everything was a death threat that I received. I mean, but I mean, it certainly felt like a lot at a lot of time, and it felt like you're talking to be honest, it felt like you're talking to a lot of idiots a lot of the time as well. So to sift the wheat from the chaff, and it's quite mentally exhausting, as I'm sure you understand, trying to explain things to people who just don't deserve your time, or who will never change their minds as well. So I think Twitter in particular was a really nice sweet spot. It was such a lovely community at one point in time, up until maybe about 2013, 14, when it was just a few people and not every single person in the world had it. It was so good. I mean, the privilege and the experience of being able to post my thoughts on Twitter live while I was watching a game on my laptop in Czech Republic.
Through a legal stream, no doubt.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you, Obi, you would be watching either in New Zealand or in Derbyshire, right? And then we'd also have friends watching in West Indies. We also have friends watching India and Pakistan. And we'd be having conversations over Twitter saying, "Oh, these guys should be selling this field, or this bowler should come on." And to have that experience, I mean, it seems like we take it for granted now, especially talking through Zoom right now, even during a pandemic. But those 10 years ago, it was such a privilege to be able to kind of do live commentary on a cricket stream and have people interact with you in real time and say nice things and say, "Oh, that was a funny joke," and we'd all be having a laugh from our sofas. It was a great time.
I think there was still the grey in between the black and the white, and at the moment we've got black and white. It either is left or right, it either is black or white, it either is right or wrong. You either agree or you disagree. There's no, and you said it right there, there's no changing people's opinions. There's no giving them information to help them understand your point of view, and maybe to help them understand what is actually happening. There's almost no grey right now, and it's and we're sadder for it, and kind of leads to the mourning. I get. You said it was liberating to an extent. It was self-fulfilling. I mean, you might as well go out in a flame as opposed to just fade away, which would have been worse. But you must have mourned that persona as well as being liberated by the freedom of not having to do that, put yourself on the line.
I don't think I mourned
it. Wasn't sad. You didn't get sad. You didn't kind of get any kind of emotions apart from being free, surely.
You think that, but I think any sadness that I had was kind of transient as well, to be honest. And it certainly didn't upset me, actually. It was just more of like, oh, that happened. And then I just really appreciated the opportunity that I had as well. I mean, I was granted a really rare opportunity through a series of really freak coincidences to be able to have this platform at this time in human history. And then I think, especially because it's undoubted that Twitter has become more toxic in the last 5 years or so. So definitely it became a lot more hard work, and it became a lot less pleasant. And yes, I'd still have like the original fans who were like super fans of what I was doing, and people who still listen to the podcast and all this sort of stuff. And I still, to this day, get so many nice messages every week from people saying, "Oh, where are you? Please come back. Please do more." And it's just, well, sometimes, it was almost like a perfect breakup, if I can describe it as that. So, I mean, just my alter ego and me, we decided to go on different paths through, and fate took us in separate paths, and we appreciate each other, I'm sure, but um, I can't imagine me still having AltCricket as a platform right now.
Well, there isn't really, you haven't really got enough time at the moment to be sort of concentrating on that. And that sort of is probably more of the reason why I wanted to talk to you, as well as that's the background, that's the history, that's how we got to know each other, if you like. But the bit now is even more important than cricket. Cricket is a game. Yeah. You're now working towards your GP certificate. Is that right? You're a sort of practicing GP. Is that how do I say that?
So I'm training to be a GP. So I've been a doctor for 5 years,
Yeah.
and I need to be a doctor for just over 1 more year to officially be a GP.
But at the moment, you're in a hospital, and it's pretty busy, and it's and I'm not being mean, and I'm not being rude, and certainly don't take it this way. But you look tired, and I'm not surprised. Look, I'm not surprised given what is going on. How hard is it, man? How are you doing?
Yeah, I mean, I think coronavirus has affected different hospitals across the country in different ways, and obviously across the world. Some countries have dealt with it better than others, and I think the same thing has happened across the UK as well. In that regionally, there's quite a lot of variation in terms of who's been affected by it worse, and it seems that London's been hit really, really badly, and that places around it have kind of got off a little bit lightly, I would say. That's not to say that, I mean, every single hospital has been affected by it. Every single person in the country has been affected by it. So it's been difficult as a doctor.
It's life and death, though, isn't it? And this is what okay, being trained in that area and having been a doctor for 5-6 years, this is part of what you do, but this is to a different scale, isn't it? This is sort of unpreparable in some ways. From workload, as opposed to resources, we're given the resources, we understand that, but from workloads and what you're dealing with every day, this is, can you prepare for something like this? Can you be ready for something like this?
Yeah, and I absolutely do think we could have been prepared better for it as a country, but I think as a doctor, just individually, I think all it requires is a bit of a shift in mindset. And I'm sure you know yourself, Ian, you know me pretty well over the past 10 years, I think, and you understand what it takes to have more than one job at once, really. I've worked very hard at very different times of my life in different industries, so I have that privilege of having that sort of level of perspective. Quite a few of my colleagues also worked in different industries and have done different things which give them a leg up. Worked in different countries, for example. A lot of my colleagues have worked in India during swine flu, bird flu pandemics. So for this is expected, right? But I think my colleagues who have almost been sheltered here in this country their whole lives, and don't have the privilege of having worked abroad and seen the sort of devastation that low level of resources or poor government planning, government corruption can have on a country's health service. These guys are now coming in for a little bit of a shock, I think.
You've never been you've never sort of hid your light under a bushel. You've always had an outspoken tone about you, which is absolutely one of the reasons why I was drawn to you and wanted to get to know you better. Everyone loves an opinion, whether it's polarizing or you agree with it. But right now, and some of the labels you've just used there, in terms of government prepared and government corruption, without getting yourself in trouble, where are we at? what are your deeper thoughts on those?
Well, I think even just harking back to the cricket stuff, I know that my opinions are always deemed as polarizing by some people who didn't like them really. But it was always steeped in one simple question, which is just, what is the truth? And I think that what I was able to bring to the table with obviously somebody like Jared Kimbo, who came slightly before me as well, was just taking a completely different external viewpoint from things and saying, just asking that one really simple question, oh, what is the truth? So one of my biggest memories when I was working as a TV reporter for Star Sports during the 2014 England versus India series was I was basically having to make my own way, and I didn't receive a lot of support from anybody. So I was having to create my own content and just do everything completely by myself, which is just not really heard of if you're doing a TV show. So I end up having to just build up good relationships with people and just almost beg, borrow, steal for footage at times, because my bosses were so bloody unsupportive. And one of my biggest memories was being around the tea room at the end of play and saying, okay, well, I know I need to interview players from England and India. How can I actually get them? And then some people would say, oh, no, don't be stupid. You can't just go up and interview somebody. I was like, why? Why? What on earth are they worried that I'm going to ask about? I'm going to say, what was it like out there today? You did well, or the opposition did well. Or, I mean, what are they worried about, right? I'm not going to ask you about like your past wives or anything like that at Lords. I mean, and then they said, no, you have to. There's an order to things, and I just couldn't understand it. I just couldn't understand it. And I remember that at the end of play, the English media officer would take a group of 6 or 7 of her favourite journalists, and then just sit on a table with them, and they'd have like some secret cabal type of meeting. I was like, why? Why is that okay to do? Why are you giving some people inside information and some people just generic information? What are you telling these people, and why? Why does a grown cricketer need somebody to convey a message on his behalf? I mean, we've already watched you for 8 hours today play. I mean, why? And just none of it really made sense to me, except if people are trying to information trade, and really it's all these forms of subtle corruption, which I would describe it as.
But now, where you are and what you're doing, you also spoke of corruption in this current situation. What is happening? What is going on? What is the from the inside looking out, if you can, what is the problem?
It's the same thing, actually. So the same questions apply. What is the truth? So the government are giving us incorrect information based on testing, evidence. I mean, today there's about to be a big U-turn in the government's policy regarding face masks and face covering in the next few days. And the government are going to say, oh, you know what, now's the right time to have face masks. 1 month ago, they said that there's no evidence for face masks, or that the evidence is very limited, and that it would have no impact on public health. About 6 weeks ago, they were still encouraging Cheltenham Race Festival to go ahead. They said that large gatherings do not have any impact on the transmission of the virus. This is what the government told us. This is what the chief medical officer told us, saying large outdoor gatherings actually don't really have much impact on transmission of the virus. And at the time, we said, well, you know, I know you're the chief medical officer, and you've been a doctor for much longer than I have, and I'm sure you've been privy to much more evidence than I have as well, and you're a really smart guy, but something just doesn't add up right there, right? At some point, you have to ask questions of the government and say, well, I know they're saying that the grass is a different color. At what point do I actually say, just stick my hand up and say, I can see it with my own eyes. I can see it with my own eyes. What you're saying isn't right. And so that's what I've been trying to do over the past 2 months, trying to find ways of closing that disparity between what the government says and what I can see with my own two eyes.
Putting this is something that I've never really been unable to do. There's times in my post-cricket playing career that I wish I could have not put my head above the parapet so often, in terms of in cricket when I see things that are not right, when I see things that are happening the wrong way, we're focusing on the wrong things. I've almost always put my head above the parapet, and that doesn't necessarily work for you. It can often work against you, because you are a conflicting message to the positivity that's supposed to be with cricket. Is that dangerous? It's in a way dangerous to your media career, and certainly in cricket. Is that dangerous to your career in medicine and what you're doing?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, but we don't really know.
But it's dangerous if you don't at the same stage, because you could be saving lives, which is a ridiculous thing for me to say. Saving lives is, well, there's not much above that. But to put your head above the parapet to help save lives is possibly could cost you what?
Exactly. So, I mean, I've been put under a lot of pressure by a lot of people saying that what I'm doing is the wrong thing to do. And it's quite striking that the people who are above me, in terms of the managers and in terms of supposed hierarchy, the people who are above me, privately, they're pretty much supportive. But publicly, they denounce me, and they say, just rid yourselves of this guy, forget what he says. And all the people on my level, and all of my colleagues, my nurses, my fellow doctors, healthcare assistants, everybody agrees with what I'm saying. But they feel they don't have a voice, because we're under so much pressure from management, whether it's the NHS, individual hospital trusts, we're under so much pressure to not speak out. And I think it's a bit of a shame that we even have to ask these questions, Obi, because the narrative really needs to be flipped and say, oh, well, a lot of people have called me brave and using these sorts of words whenever I have an interview. I mean, you're the first person who's not called me brave, which is kind of all right. But
I think I've said it in a different way.
But everybody's calling me a whistleblower, for example, and I don't think that's the case. I mean, it's exactly what I was doing with cricket, which is just asking a simple question: what is the truth? And really, if the truth is that our power structures have flipped the narrative on us, saying that all the pressure should be seeping down towards the individual and making us worried about our own careers and us worried about our own families and livelihoods. And for example, me, I've got to do 1 and a bit years to reach the end of my GP certification. So there's always that sort of question saying, oh, will I reach that point, or will they refer me somewhere? Or ultimately, I know that speaking out will encourage others to speak out, and then lives will be saved, because currently conditions for doctors over the past few months have really been variable at best and unacceptable in some situations. And we know historically as well that when regimes try to silence doctors from speaking out, whether it's social media, on press, and all of this sort of stuff, and nobody likes it that I'm doing this right now, by the way. People would hate it if they knew that I'm even talking to you, Ubi. But history tells us that when regimes, whether it's individual power structures or wider governments or countries or international organizations, when they try and hint towards silencing doctors, silencing journalists, which is happening right now on a systematic way, the country itself will then have a shit next 20 years. That much we know.
What? Not. Look, it's a tough one for me, because this sort of started before I left. I was in New Zealand for well, it was supposed to be for a month. It ended up an extra couple of weeks because I couldn't get a flight back. But the way that it was dealt with in New Zealand, smaller and less densely populated, granted, but the way that things moved, I still thought New Zealand was a week late in starting the lockdown. I was quite opinionated about that. I had my mum and dad, who I was staying with, I had them locked down that week before that we as a country went into lockdown, because I was looking at looking at all the articles I could. I was looking at the research. I was looking at the conspiracy theories as well. And I'm looking at it going, how can I keep myself and my mum and dad as safe as possible? And it's pretty simple. And I annoyed my mum and dad because of how hard I was on them in terms of what we can and what we can't do. But I'm looking after 3 people in a country that did most things right. You're looking after, I would hate to think of the people that you're looking after at the moment and the workload that you have at the moment, and also trying to on a greater level, the more public level, trying to impact that as well. That takes a toll. That has to take a toll. That has to not just as a physical tiredness. There's a mental and an emotional state that is frustrating, and can you control it? Do you see what I mean? Can you keep yourself safe, keep the people around you safe in terms of making the right decisions?
Oh, that's a really good question. And I think, again, I'm really lucky because I've had this background in cricket and speaking to people like yourself and speaking to people who've dealt with pressure at a really high level. So you're going into bowl, you've got 2 runs to defend, last ball of the World Cup final, right?
As long as you don't say it's Savag, it's fine. Okay, just don't say it's Savag.
Oh God, okay, we won't get into that.
Yeah.
Fine. Well, how many times did you get Tendulkar out in your career, Hobie?
Just once. It's all right.
Yeah, I mean that's one more than most people in the line. So you'll always have that. Don't worry. But
back to you. Come on.
I think having that experience of speaking to people such as yourself, and obviously those who may be interested, I used to do a series of podcasts for a podcast called Radio Cricket. It's still available on SoundCloud and all these places. We did about 140 episodes, and most of them are just myself ranting. But I did quite a few interviews, probably about 20 plus, with current players, former players, coaches, commentators. And we talked to people like Dale Steyn, like Paddy Upton, Hosha Bogle, and we're talking about mentality. Really, really talking about mentality and what do you do in high pressure situations? What do you do when the chips are down and you've got all the weight of the world on your shoulders? This is the sort of thing that I would be asking. So this has kind of been instilled in me for a good number of years, and I'm thankful and I'm lucky even I'm thankful to people such as yourself, OB. You've given me even nuggets of wisdom. Fair enough, you've given me loads of shit over the years as well. We'll ignore that.
Grey. That's the grey bit, not the black and white.
Yeah, and I'm thankful to have had the platform where people who've been kind of historically good cricketers, like Hall of Fame cricketers and Hall of Fame coaches, innovators and thinkers, I've been in good touch with them over the years, and they've been giving me good advice. Even just casually discussing things with them has really put me in a good mind frame to deal with any sort of situation. So for me, this is not taking a mental toll. It is fairly exhausting just because I am working 13-hour days, and my workload in April has been a bit ridiculous. I think I worked 65 hours, 78 hours, 65 hours, and then 50 something hours. So that's just my time at hospital. And then on top of that, I'm doing all of this stuff outside. So it's sleep-wise, I look like shit, and I haven't had a haircut in about 3 months probably now as well. So I definitely do look like shit, and I feel like shit at times, but there's no time to even think about that. You just know that you've got to finish this marathon.
Okay, nice deflection, but let me put it in another way. During a test match, every night I would get an hour fewer sleep. I would start with 6 hours if I was 6, maybe 7 hours on the night before, and I would lose an hour a night. So by heading into day 5, if we got to day 5, we get to day 5, I've maybe had 3.5 hours sleep, possibly in like 45-minute blocks. So I'm shot physically, and that can have an effect on your sleep, which then has a massive effect on your emotional state, which then has a massive effect on your mental state, which then means you make mistakes. My mistake was I bowled a bad ball, I'd nick off when I should have been whatever. Your mistake is a whole lot bigger consequences. Now, justify your working state at the moment, given that your consequences are not just bowling a bad ball or getting taken off at the end of a spell.
Well, I think I have to give credit to my own team as well. That doctors do rally around each other, and the public have rallied around us as well. Even, for example, public delivering meals to the hospital has been really helpful, and I think there have been lots of little small helpful bits like that which have made life easier for doctors. I think also, to be absolutely fair, where I'm working and outside London, I think the workload has been a little bit less at times than we expected. We've had times where it's just completely intense, and you can't take your eye off, or you can't take a breather. But I think most hospitals have been broadly really supportive about the well-being of their staff, and most hospitals I'm aware of at least seem to have been quite well staffed most of the time. So because we haven't received the crushing influx of patients that we were expecting, at least until now, I don't think that things have been as mentally tiresome as they otherwise would have been. So even during a 13-hour shift, it's not like I'm bowling every single over. Oh, we're just going into cricket analogies now, aren't we? But it's not like I'm bowling like 20 overs in a row. It's like you bowl one over, take a breather, you let your partner take over. But I don't know if that even makes sense in a doctor's point of view. I have to work on that analogy.
Yeah, I think you do. Another point, another thing.
There's enough time to graze at third man.
Sure.
Does that work?
It's all right. You can go and have a wander in the paddock. Yeah, okay. You can have a tea break or a lunch break, maybe. Yeah. There's another point to this that is that intrigues me, and this is part of the reason why I want to be talking to people like yourself, and I typically focus on the negative because that is what makes the person and what makes the performer, the sportsman, whatever. It's the negative influences that turn you into success often. The other bit that I'm always looking at is preparedness and how well prepared you are. Now, I have a cousin who was a first responder for the shootings in Christchurch, the massacre there, which is just over a year ago. Now, he was one of the first on the scene in an ambulance, and I got another cousin who was in the ICU in the hospital, and they were dealing with hate. They were dealing with murders of hate. Dealing with a car accident and things like that are, I think, very different. But they had to deal with the consequences of hate from first a physical and then a mental and emotional perspective. You're dealing with the consequences of neglect and bad information, but you're also seeing the consequences are death and injury. Well, serious illness and death. How prepared are you, or have you been, to deal with that? Is there enough preloading of those strategies to deal with this in your training, or is that something that you just have to pick up on the job? Let's say you weren't 5 years deep. Let's say you were a first-year doctor. Is there enough of that prepared training for what you're dealing with now?
Good question. I think, in personally speaking, I think I've been able to cope pretty well, as I said. But I think also I'm broadly negative of a lot of what's happened over the past couple of months. But in terms of the practical realities of things, the first-year doctors have kind of been put in more appropriate situations, and I think, at least from what I understand, they've been giving a lot of support and wrapped in cotton wool. So maybe they are working. Everybody's working more hours, to be fair. But from at least the stories I've heard, nobody seems to be like. It's not like a first-year doctor is is going to their first day in the hospital and then being asked to set up a ventilator or doing something completely unfamiliar. I think broadly doctors are really supportive of each other during this time especially. And at least in my own experience, what I've seen is doctors supporting other doctors and not letting them be put in difficult situations which they aren't familiar with. Whether that's because the patient load's been slightly less at times, or whether like staffing has been pretty good on the whole, I'm not really sure. But in other countries, at least, if you're a first-year doctor and you're kind of put into the fire in places where they've really been overwhelmed at times, like for example, my colleagues in Italy and Spain have been in constant touch with me and saying they have been overwhelmed at times. And my colleagues in America as well, in New York especially. A lot of places around the world have been overwhelmed, and as a doctor, it's very, very difficult to cope if you haven't had previous experience outside the hospital. I think inside the hospital, you really just need to know the anatomy of the place and know the people and know where the tools are kept, and then you can pretty much get on with things after a little bit of experience. But what really helps build that resilience, which is I think the main thing that you're asking about, the main thing that helps build that resilience is your experiences outside hospital. And yeah, fine, you might have a traumatic CPR or something which you might always remember the rest of your life. But it's those experiences outside the hospital, whether you play sports, or whether you coach sports, or whether you've done charity work abroad, or being put in difficult situations out of your comfort zone. I think out of your comfort zone is really the main place where you build that resilience, isn't it? So I think that's the single most important factor, because right now in UK, we're talking on 1st of May, and we're probably about 6 weeks into the pandemic. Really, we're about 5 weeks into lockdown, 4 or 5 weeks into lockdown. Really, we're about 10 weeks into the pandemic, but the government really didn't acknowledge it, and which is really the big problem. But I think a lot of people are going to treat it as, now Boris Johnson said, oh, we're past the first peak. So people are going to say, oh, see, we won the war. That's what people are going to view it as. And then people are going to get complacent. Doctors are going to get mentally complacent as well.
Yeah.
But really, this is a marathon which goes on for, we don't know how long.
Yeah.
So you've just got to keep moving, and you've got to keep, you got to keep those legs pumping, really. You got to keep your body moving, but we don't know how long. And that's where the resilience comes in. That's where the mental preparedness comes on, saying, okay, they've sent me in here. I don't know how long I'm going to be here for. I don't know when the next time I'm going to see my family. I don't know. I mean, my wife's pregnant right now, right? So I mean, we're due in mid-July. We don't know when our parents are going to be able to see their first grandkid. So it's all these sorts of questions which will end up taking a mental toll. And yeah.
But there's an element that I resilience is a crutch. It'll sort of help you for a period of time. It's not something that you can rely on all the time. And at the moment, it's all the time. You're dealing with deaths that could have been avoided. So resilience is great, but it runs out. Surely, are you worried?
Yes, I mean to an extent, I believe. Yeah, I mean if you view it as a gas in the tank thing,
yeah,
fine. At the same time, I suppose it needs to be topped up by those experiences on a reasonably consistent basis. And during lockdown, for example, right now, I would be at the start of cricket season, and even just chatting with my mates during a game, or being in those mini pressure situations, that kind of helps me, like especially as an opening batsman, even at village level. That always used to be really, really helpful for me, because I felt, okay, I'm up against the best bowler. I know I'm at the biggest pressure point of the game as well most of the time. However I start, the rest of the game is going to follow like that. So I always view that as my own sort of personal meditation time, when you're completely blissful. Not to mention somebody like Sehwag, but he wasn't thinking about anything else than hitting the ball at that time. And so even if I would have a really difficult Monday to Friday, I know that on Saturday, as soon as I put that helmet on, everything else was just blocked out. And so that used to be sort of my meditation, that really good outlet. So that even if I got a dark where I scored 100 or whatever, at the end of the day, I wouldn't be filled with those sorts of toxic thoughts of pain at the hospital. I would have some sort of mental refresher. And obviously exercise really helps as well. Even the little amount that you get during grazing at third man during a village game, it's helpful and therapeutic.
Look, I'm still going to push you. I'm still going to push you on this. A friend of mine used to fly. He was a crew on helicopters that flew in theatre into war scenarios and flew through, has been shot at, etc., etc. And he would always just acknowledge it in the same way that you've just kind of acknowledged it. It's just work, and it's just another analogy, like you go and play cricket, you go and do that. The problem is, for me to digest that, is that cricket isn't life and death. He was dealing with life and death being shot at. You're dealing with life and death and your own mortality as well, because if you get things wrong, you catch it. That's not cool. Understatement of the year. So how it's still more taxing than trying to make a cricket analogy, surely.
Oh no, and you know, I'm just saying that cricket is my coping strategy. Playing cricket is my coping strategy.
Well, what have you got? You haven't got that now. So what?
So now,
yeah.
I mean, what's helping me with my resilience is actually this other outlet that I have, right? So it's not like I'm just coming home from work and then just kind of stewing in my own emotions and my own thoughts. A lot of people have been getting in touch with me over the past couple of months from across the country and around the world as well, talking to me about this systematic healthcare failures, systematic government corruption, and problems which we see are fundamental to the future of our democracy. So I've certainly not done it consciously thinking I need this as an outlet, but certainly, if anything, it's more taxing than anything. But at least I know that I have an end goal in sight, which is to hold people to account and actually be face to face with them when social distancing laws are relaxed, and actually be able to look somebody in the eye and say, tell me, why have you knowingly sent my colleagues into work with chinks in their armor?
It's hard to fathom from my perspective. I used to fear getting hurt when I was batting, but it's hard to fathom seeing unnecessary death and seeing people, seeing families pulled to bits because of misinformation and some of the other things. And I just find that is a longer lasting memory. Do you think there will be some PTSD style issues towards the end of this as we come out? It's very easy, as you said, to be resilient and to rely on your level of your gas tank of resiliency. Do you think there is going to be some serious emotional and mental trauma from people like yourself towards the end of it?
Well, we can only go on past history and expect that we're going to have similar fallout to what's happened in previous disasters. For example, terrorist attacks is what we can go on, really.
Yeah.
And obviously there is always a lot of PTSD and residual anxiety, and this is a period of great chronic trauma for the country, and being locked down as well and not having social interaction. I mean, I don't want to make any predictions, but I wouldn't be surprised if we have a lot of mental health issues stemming from this. I mean, even giving my example is saying about, well, I know that going out to play cricket and just spending time in a green park with my friends is just really therapeutic for me, and not having access to that is I don't know what sort of effects it's going to have on me mentally in the long term as well. But So yeah, I would expect it, especially amongst healthcare workers. I would expect it. At the same time, I don't want to be all gloom and doom. I think a lot of hospitals have been really, really good in England, at least, in terms of getting well-being strategies and coping strategies for doctors and for nurses as well. We give the example of public helping us out with food. I mean, there's one organisation, Meals for the NHS, who've been giving our hospital 100 meals every day at dinner time.
Wow.
And that just takes the stress off me, thinking, okay, well, I don't have to go out shopping every day. If I've been working a 13-hour day and I've got like 6 shifts in a row, I don't want to be figuring out when I can get in the queue at Tesco, which I have to wait half an hour in anyway. So I mean, it's these sorts of, and then going home and then cooking for like an hour and then washing up and then being a man and then just leaving it in the sink and then having my wife angry at me anyway. All these sorts of things, it just kind of reduces the load on you. And I think our hospitals have been quite good at coping as well, like having just like our own hospital has a well-being hub. So they transformed one of the lecture theatres into just a relaxation room. And it sounds really like new agey and silly at times, but I mean, they've got like just a big projector screen playing just soothing and calming noises. And you can just go there, sit there, have a cup of tea and a biscuit and just whisper to your colleagues. And it's just a nice thing. And so I think people are aware of it. And I hope it does take the edge off all of the chronic trauma and things, but there's obviously nowhere to stop. And once you've seen a certain volume of people, and especially what I've dealt with as well is the families of the deceased healthcare workers get in touch with me.
Yeah.
And I've been with them. They've called me during these times of anguish and deep stress and trauma. And I've had to really dig deep, and it's been really, really, I don't want to use the word traumatic for me when it's been truly traumatic for the families, but it's definitely kept me up at night. It's definitely kept me up at night.
That's and that's tough. It's kind of in that message there is a positive in terms of this relaxation room you're talking about, in terms of strategies, in terms of what has been adapted and being brought in. Are these things that you think will continue? Do you think these sort of rooms, these lecture halls, will stay as they are? Because actually, gee whiz, this is actually a really good thing to be having for well-being, and mindfulness and all those just being able to take a break from it. Do you think some of these things will stay, and the lessons will be, these ideas will be kept?
Ideally, yes. And ideally, yes, doctors have a tough time during non-pandemic times. And a lot of the time we're treated with disdain by a lot of groups, whether it's parts of the media or even parts of the public, unfortunately, and definitely management, definitely politicians at times treat doctors with disdain. And yes, I'd love to say that everything's going to be rosy after this and everybody's going to clap every Thursday night at 8 p.m. and everybody's going to remember Captain Tom or Colonel Tom and raising £30 million and all this sort of stuff, and everything's going to be rosy. And once we're not worried about hand washing so much, everybody's going to do like a hands across America sort of thing all across the world and say, kumbaya. Yeah. But I mean, the reality of it is that as soon as they say, okay, you know what, let's start counting the pennies on the pound now, let's start making the most of every single square inch of hospital space again. We know that all of these little niceties are going to be the first places to go. And this is what I'm fighting for, actually. Because I think that doctors and nurses have been treated really, really poorly by the government at times. And if we don't get a simple answer to a simple question, which is what is the truth, and have the government knowingly sent healthcare workers in with chinks in their armor, and as a result, have doctors and nurses died, have families lost their loved ones in the most traumatic circumstances. is this what's happened? And if so, then we need people to be held accountable. If we don't ask these questions now, and if we don't rattle the cages now, and if we don't upset people now over this, then we're going to have it's not just going to be doctors and it's not just going to be nurses, it's going to be the whole country. Because if we, as your protectors and your guardians, can't speak out, and if we don't know the answers, if I can't answer questions and say to the family of a deceased doctor or a deceased nurse, if I can't look them in the eye and say, look, I mean, it's like the government has sent us into battle. They created this narrative saying, oh, it's friendly fire. These things happen in war times, but I don't think it's the case. And I think our government have to answer that. And if not, we're going to have a really shit next 20 years, I can tell you that.
Yeah, well said. Thank you. One of your other outlets, apart from cricket, is music. And the Palpations is a band you're in. Have you been able to
Palpitations?
Sorry, yeah, good. Palpitations, the feelings. Have you been able to get together, to Zoom, to play, to escape, to do something and write a song about this kind of, like, what have you been able to, that sounds cliche, but there will be one, I'm sure. What have you guys been able to do as a group to look after each other there?
Nothing. Can't do anything. Nothing. And look, so two of us are doctors in our 4-piece band, and we managed to go to Downing Street a few weeks ago to protest there. Yeah. That's basically what we've been able to do as a band, socially distancing protest. That's what we're able to do. And really, I think we understand that music-wise, it's just impractical to do over Zoom, or if you're not in person, it's just impractical. So we can do recordings by ourselves. But I'm quite upset because even though I've got this guitar in the background now, I haven't picked up my guitar in the best part of a couple of months now, because I've just been so intensely focused on everything that I've been doing. And so from band point of view, it's very annoying. Especially, we had big plans. For this summer. We're going to play festivals. We're going to go abroad. We're going to do a lot of things. And but I mean, at the same time, there's nothing more punk than protesting. So we're just shifting focus. This is part of the story of our band. We're fighting power.
I hope you're keeping track of it all, and I hope you're creating in the same way that punk would. You're creating a story, and you're creating not an anarchy, but an anarchy. You're creating something to entertain yourselves, but keep track of it and make a story of it. I hope you're doing that, because you're in a very privileged sort of position to be seeing it, and I say that in all the wrong ways, but you're seeing it from the inside, given your education, given what you've given up to be where you are. But this changes you as a person. This changes your whole outlook on everything. This clouds this unclouds a lot of thinking, a lot of opinions. It solidifies a lot of those things, and so you've got some stories, and you've got some messages to share, and I'm really genuinely grateful for your time, and I get it. It's absolutely hard, but congrats, man. Well done for what you're doing. And I know I shouldn't have to say that, but you've got your head above the parapet, and that's really horrible. That's a tough place to be, my man. That is that's hard work. So well done, man. Well done.
No, I mean, look, I think it would be a dereliction of duty to not do this, and I think you're kind of alluding it to a little bit before and just now as well. But I mean, the obvious example in cricket about sticking your head above the parapet, especially when you're in a team and all this sort of stuff, is match fixing. And speaking about corruption allegations and actually being the person who can actually speak the truth, right? And I know a lot of cricketers have had a lot of difficulty, especially during the IPL times as well, when there were allegations of corruption flying around, and you've got maybe $1 million contract which you don't want to compromise, and you don't want to cause a fuss, but at the same time you think, well, you know what, this one season could see me through financially for a really long time. I've had a few injuries here and there, and nobody knows what's going to happen next year, and the national team are kind of umming and ahhing about selecting me for that tri-series. And maybe if I just kept my head down for a couple of months and then just did like an expose anonymously in a few years' time. But even then, I really sympathize with everybody who's been put in difficult situations. But I think, again, these are systematic problems. Somebody who wants to tell the truth should only ever be encouraged to do so. And it's the people who are preventing us from doing so, whether it's in medicine, whether it's in politics, journalism, if you're playing for a cricket team. You should never have any doubt about being able to speak the truth to power or to a widespread audience. And anytime you do, I think it's time that we have to start questioning our power structures.
Mate, on that note, that's pretty powerful, and that sounds like it sounds hollow in a way, and it feels awkward to say that. But Dr. Nish, I appreciate your time, and I appreciate the messages and what you're doing. That's probably the greatest bit, what you're doing. So thank you for keeping us safe, and thank you for speaking the truths that will save lives. I am in adoration of what you're doing and how you're doing it. So thank you, my man, and thank you so much for your time.
No, thank you so much. And for anybody listening to this, we're currently crowdfunding for a legal challenge against the government, which we've already started. I think, unfortunately, taking this to court is the only way to go about this. We've exhausted every option.
The link for that will be in the description below. So do what you can, because this is not how it should be, I don't think. Well, we know that. Mate, thank you. Speak soon.
Yeah, it's good to talk to you, Obi. How's things with yourself, man?
Mate, all good here. All good here. I gotta before I start recording. Yeah, I got a wife who's got a lung condition that if she catches this, it could actually take her. So we are housebound pretty much the whole time at the moment, relying on delivery, shoppings, and I get the soapy cloth out and I wash all the bags and I wash down all the shopping that comes in. I'm soapy clothing melons and apples and everything. So we're highly aware of this scenario. 2 kids and a mum who is amazing. So we're hugely aware, and I think the what I saw in New Zealand and how it was dealt with there, and me being hyper aware of politics and geopolitics and having too much of an interest has kind of helped keep us safe, and we haven't taken this lightly at all, given the scenario, but I don't think we would have anyway, because if I pass it to someone else and someone else dies, that's murder, and it's not necessarily murder in the law, but you've killed someone, and that's too heavy to take. So I've had that sort of philosophy for quite a while, and it's hard. It's bloody hard, and we give up a lot, but we give up a lot for a short time to have it all soon. And so, I'm in the same boat as you, and outspoken about how naive people are to I don't know who to believe. Come on, it's pretty obvious what we've got to be doing. So Well done, you. Thank you. And I'm going to hit the stop button now because this is long enough. Take care, my man. Good to see you.
Cheers. So when do you think this will be out then, Obi?
Like, let me hit the stop button, bro. Jesus.
So what happened?
Hi, Ian O'Brien here. Thanks for getting to the end of this 108 with IOB. I'd appreciate it if you'd like and subscribe, please. But also leave us a message down below in the comments about what was your most interesting or favourite part of this chat. Thanks a lot. Love ya.